this video, we're going to show you all about how we built this root cellar.
Keep watching if you want to check out how we got it done.
So this video documents this entire root cellar build from nothing all the way to what you see here. And it's going to be quite an extensive process. It took us a really long time to get it done, but we are done with it and we wanted to show you guys how we did it.
We're not construction people, so we're not looking for criticisms on how we did this. And our climate is pretty unique compared to a lot of the rest of the US. So we got away with some things that you may not be able to get away with in, say, like Florida.
Yeah, or Minnesota or places like that where it's really wet all the time. Anyways, we're going to get right into it in this video. I hope you enjoy it. Stick around to the end because at the end we are going to take you inside of the root cellar to see what it looks like inside. So here we go. This is the site of where we will be putting the root cellar. This is the before, and I kind of always think it's fun to look at what things look like before getting started with a big project. Now, pretty early into the project, once we had the backhoe rented, which we did rent out the backhoe, we discovered this, a ton of trash right where we were going to put the root cellar. This was a pretty devastating find because we really didn't know how deep that trash went, as this was apparently a site for throwing trash from the old homestead that this property used to be a part of. So when we discovered this, our first thoughts were, how much trash is here? How deep does this trash go? And is this a horrible location to put the root cellar? Is it even possible? And looking at the lay of the land of this new property to us, this was really one of the only places that made sense. So I really wanted to put the root cellar here.
It keeps going that way. It's a big dump.
Looks like the trash pit's getting filled in and we are going to pick somewhere else for the root cellar to go. This is really frustrating. We originally picked this location because this is one of the only, I guess, hills on this property. It's not really a hill, but it does have some sort of a slant to it. It's also in very close proximity to the house, and it is really the only location on the property that makes sense. And this is us deliberating about if we should even press on with digging today. You're on.
40-year-old ketchup.
Stop. So what are we going to do here, John?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I say we dig it. Well, turns out we decided that we had the backhoe rented for the rest of the day, and we were going to see how much trash we could pull out of this area of the ground because we really had no other place set aside in our mind for where the root cellar could possibly go on the property. And after a lot of digging, we pulled out a ton of trash, but the good news is that it wasn't a thick layer of trash that went all the way down to the water table or something crazy like that. And we were able to get to solid ground. And while I'm on the topic of the trash pit, I'm going to address the fact that the trash that we found were things like household items. They were not anything that was toxic or hazardous. Things that we did find were things like baby food jars, soda cans, clothes, plastic chip bags that were all really well intact, and we even found paper that looked like it had hardly aged and not decomposed at all, which was kind of interesting despite the fact that it had been there for quite a while. I know we will probably still get some comments about the trash pit, but I just wanted to put an effort in here to clear this up right away that it was nothing that gross. And here we are. This is what it looked like on day one. And we did have a lot of trash to clean up, many garbage bags full, not just those two right there, but this is our start for what will become the root cellar. In the following days, we started leveling the area and spraying it down with some water to kind of tamper things. That was what you saw there. And now it's time to get some materials on site. Luckily, we were able to have the cinder blocks delivered because this would have been a lot of work to just get them here in the truck. So this was definitely the way to go. And after all of that, we ended up with 4 pallets worth of cinder blocks to get this project started. The next step was making the forms for the concrete foundation and having the rebar there ready to go. We did pay to have this poured, which was really a good step. We looked into mixing it ourselves, and that would have ended up costing a lot of money. And the final product would have probably not come out so good. One thing that we did keep in mind was where the rebar was coming up to make sure it would be coming up in one of the holes of the cinder block and not where there's an edge, so that was pretty important. The bottom run and the corners were done first, and a simple string line was used to ensure everything was coming out nice and straight. I do have to give my husband and my dad a lot of credit because they are the ones doing all the work and laying all of this cinder block. They learned a lot from YouTube and just plugged away at it until the job was done. They said that the string lines were very important in order to keep the walls straight, and they shared that the hardest thing was making sure that the courses stayed level, and that was a really important key step because if one course got off, it became really hard to correct it on the following courses. A little bit about this root cellar. The inside dimensions are 8 foot on that back wall and 12 feet on the side walls for the main room that you see. The breezeway or front room, I'm calling it the breezeway, is 4 feet wide by 6 feet deep. And the height that we ended up achieving is 6 foot 7 inches, right about there, which is pretty nice. My husband's 6'3", and he can walk around in there, no big deal. If someone was a little bit taller, it would be a little bit annoying, but it's still plenty of room. We did use a cement mixer in order to mix all the mortar and just kind of worked in small batches to get it done. Here he is laying the last couple, finishing up that breezeway room. Almost there. It really did seem like it took forever to get this done, but once we had a plan as far as the pattern to lay it in and planning out those half blocks that ended up going right on the front, it really did go quick and just as planned. And finally, the cinder block is done. Yay, this really felt like a monumental moment and like we had finally reached some real progress. Now it is time to fill in all of the holes in the cinder block with some cement. We had the same company come and do this that did the footer, which I think was a really good move because they got a special structural cement and that was just a little bit better as far as making things nice and strong. Any rebar that you see stabbed down into the cement is additional rebar. There's already rebar located in, I believe, every other column. And after this was done, we got the first coat of foundation sealant on, which was not filmed, but you will see it in the next clip.
It's a bright one today. We are finally starting again on the root cellar. Today the plan is to get the roof on. So let's get going. We have a helper today, so that will be really nice.
Finally onto the roof at this point, and it definitely feels good. Now, do you remember at the beginning of the video where I said that we are not construction experts and we are not advising others to necessarily build a root cellar in this way? I am aware that this part of our build we will probably catch some slack for and get some comments about, which we would just like to prevent. So this is how we chose to do it. If you do not want to make your roof this way, please do not. Please do whatever you would like to do. Part of our reasoning for building a wood roof is due to our climate. You see the kind of ground that we're working with. You saw what that trash looked like, the fact that it had not decomposed, and that really went into our thinking when we decided to build the roof out of wood, even though it will be buried. We think it'll still last a long time in our environment, and your environment might be completely different than ours. Anyways, what we decided to do was they are 2x12s and they are 1 foot on center. And then we decided to use treated 3/4 inch plywood for the roof and secured everything down with a nail gun. So it kind of just went up real easy, kind of like a deck, and plywood going on top of it. And then we kind of did the front breezeway room the same way as far as putting it together. Here are a couple shots from inside the root cellar and now outside the root cellar. It was really awesome to get to this point in the project. Once we had that roof on, our next step was sealing up various cracks that we could now see when you went into the root cellar. You could see all of the light coming through in various areas. Now, when we put this roof on, it was a tiny bit off on this edge, so we did have to fill that in with a little bit more mortar. And then what we started doing was going around and filling all of the cracks with caulking, and I will not bore you with watching how many times I had to do this. I think we ended up using 3 or 4 tubes of this, and I also ended up doing all the cracks on the ceiling as well.
Today it is time to get another coat of sealant on the root cellar. We opted to use this paint. This was really light because it already had the first coat removed from it, so this is just the end of the first bucket. But it is non-fibered foundation coating. So that's what we opted to use. This stuff is really strong smelling, as you can imagine. And I'm just going to get some paint clothes on, and we're going to get the outside of this all painted. You can also see There are a bunch of marks where we went ahead and sealed any cracks that we could find. We sealed all along where the roof connects to the block, and also just any cracks we could find, especially the vertical cracks. It was more challenging to mortar in between those, as you know, this isn't like our professional job or anything. And we got that all sealed, and today, now it's time to get some of this coating on the foundation and on the roof. We're painting the whole thing with this stuff.
Now when I say that this foundation sealant is pretty intense as far as the smell and what it'll also do to your hands and skin if you touch it, I'm really not kidding. The first time that I painted, I didn't wear such intense paint clothes, and the paint on my legs and arms didn't come off for about 3 days despite my scrubbing. You also notice here that I went ahead and painted that lip right where the cinder block meets the foundation. I wanted to really get that, so we got that done. In all, we ended up painting on 3 coats of sealant on the root cellar. Our next step here was to put some blocks in between the 2x12s that are 1 foot on center, just to prevent any sort of warping. You might also notice the 2x4s that are laying up against the cinder block attached to the roof right along the edge of the cinder block there. Now is a really good shot of them. Those are there to prevent the walls from pushing in and to keep the roof kind of locked on top of the root cellar. Obviously gravity is going to be holding it down as well, but this will prevent any shifting. Where this 2x4 is attached to the 2x12s, there are 2 nails securing them together, so that should really not move at all. We did also add the same thing in the breezeway after we built the doors down the road. And the blocks that we are putting on right now between the 2x12s are just staggered to accommodate them. It really doesn't matter to us what they look like, but I think they ended up looking decent. Now it's time to secure some of these spacer blocks from the outside.
That looks fun. This is a dirty, dusty job with the type of soil that we have over here, but we are on to starting to bury some of these walls coming inside. We just finished getting these little boards between these rafters. The whole purpose of those is to hopefully prevent any warping. It's cooler down here, really hot up here by the ceiling, which is really interesting. I think it holds on to heat. And then when we come in here in the afternoon, it is really hot in here when it's colder outside. So it's kind of interesting how it's holding heat or holding cool air so far. This is something I'm really excited that we don't have to worry about caving in anymore. As you've been watching in the video, it's kind of been a race against time and elements and all of that to not let it cave in, and we got lucky. Back over here, look at this. I'm really glad this didn't cave in, and we really just had, you know, under a foot right here to work with. But now we can start getting it all buried and not worry about this being an issue anymore. So now, let's fill it in.
This root cellar ended up taking us a really long time to get done and to do all of the pieces to it. And during this time, our tractor broke. So that was really hard, and well, we ended up using the shovel for a big part of getting at least this part filled in. Eventually, we will buy a new tractor, but right now we're working on the doorway, and it's all by hand. So my poor husband's out there working in the heat and moving a lot of dirt little by little. Yes, it's another clip with more shovel work, and I wanted to include this clip specifically to show you just how dry and dusty the environment is that we're working in. I know it is the dry season right now, but it was unreal. It was like we were on Mars and it was moon dust that we were shoveling around. So just wanted to include this to show you those piles of dust. Now, being that it was so dusty, we did decide to put some pea gravel in the bottom of the root cellar inside of it, just so we stopped stomping around in a bunch of dust. You can tell it's obviously a hot summer day, being my daughter's in a swimsuit walking around. We smoothed it out with a couple of shovel kid rides, and now we are on to putting the door in. We did end up getting the doors repurposed from the Restore because our height was so short. So we ended up having to cut the doors, and here we are cutting the holes for the vents, and it is on to foam board on the roof. What are you doing?
Put this on, then mark it, and then we're off to the races.
We opted to do foam board on the roof because we decided to not put as much dirt on top as we had originally planned due to all the weight of the excess dirt had we put the excess dirt at the end. The foam board that we ended up going with was a really good R value of R15, so that added a lot of insulation, and as we were doing this we realized we need the vent pipe in first before we can go ahead and put the insulation board down, so we decided to switch gears and get the vent pipe in. While waiting for the glue to dry on the vent pipes, we switched gears back to the doorway over here. And as you can see, now this doorway to the main room has been framed in, which I did not get videoed because we kind of just pieced it together, and you can see the doors are on already, and this is what we're looking like. It's looking pretty good in here. These vent pipes have through the roof on them. Hopefully it's a good enough seal for the styro that is going to be going over top, and then we'll seal it again soon. Next, it was time to get all of the foam board on the roof, and we just held this together with a little bit of tape, mostly to prevent things from blowing around in the wind if the wind did pick up. To keep the insulation in place, we did use a little adhesive underneath the pieces that are on the side of the walls there, and the boards are just there for a little bit of pressure. Things were starting to shift a little bit, so we did end up going around and putting a few really long screws through the pieces of insulation that are on the sides just to tack them on better. Here you can see we went around with some spray foam insulation to just fill any big gaps that we found around the insulation and the building. So at this point we have the styrofoam on there. It is kind of just tacked on. We're planning on the weight of all of the dirt to kind of really hold it on, you know, for the long haul. We are next going to do a vapor barrier, and we're going to do this kind of in a strange way. We're going to do the front half and then the back half. And then we're gonna put a pond liner over all of that. So it's gonna have kind of two vapor barriers. Let's get these plastic pieces cut. We are using 6 mil plastic on the first layer. The second layer, that's the pond liner, is 15.5 mil. I am also debating maybe adding another layer over top, but we'll see. Here goes the vapor barrier over the building. Now, soon after we started, we realized we did not have nearly enough plastic, so we got the front half going there and then the back half, and then I went to the store to get another piece of plastic for the middle. We are securing this down with just some duct tape, just to kind of avoid it getting tossed around by the wind too much, as it will have another barrier over it. So we're not really counting on the duct tape to do anything else besides just hold it temporarily. Now it is time for the pond liner. This pond liner was a little bit more expensive, so we were a little worried about cutting these two holes and having it work for the vent pipes. And turns out it went on there really easily and really nicely. All we did was cut the first hole, stretch it, and then kind of look at where the next hole would be, cut it, and pull it over it, and it fit like a glove. Here I am going around taping the corners a little bit to make sure that they just look nice and secure, and water will flow down the correct way, if that makes sense. We also tossed a few boards that were laying around from the project over the top of the building temporarily to weigh down the vapor barrier and make sure it didn't blow away in the wind, before finally going to bed on this night. Here we go with another day of shovel work, trying to open up this entrance and kind of move some dirt around onto the walls of the building. This was tedious, and I'm including this in the video just to remind myself of how much shovel work we really did do on this project. And this is what the entrance is looking like as far as the slope. It is definitely a work in progress. Here's my attempt to try to seal up these vent pipes. I took an extra piece of pond liner, made a little square, and then cut a little slit inside of it, pretty much an X mark, put it over top of the pipe, and put more through the roof over it to secure it to the roof of the root cellar. After that had dried, we found this stretch tape that is meant for pipes and patched it up this way. It looked like a pretty good seal, so I'm hoping that this will not be a point where we are having any leaking in the future. And here we go. To get the project done, we got a new tractor. This was pretty exciting, a pretty big purchase, and it will get used all over the farm, so we don't feel too guilty about this big purchase. We really do need it for all of the gardens, and it made filling in the root cellar so much more efficient than what we had been doing with a shovel. Of course it did. And this big pile of dirt got moved rather quickly, so it was kind of nice to just sit back, relax, and watch this get all put in here with my husband working the tractor. That was a big relief. And as you can see, there's still quite a bit of trash on the side that we will be cleaning, and honestly, some of it will go back into the hole because it honestly doesn't really matter that it's in there. No one else is gonna know. Well, now you all will know on YouTube, but it won't really matter in the long term. At this point, it is time to finally start making our retaining wall around the root cellar. Now, to get this done, we lucked out into having a big pile of rocks on the property that the old owners had piled up intentionally for their goats and sheep to use to climb up on top of. The guys worked hard to get those rocks split up nicely so that they would stack really nicely. And we'll take you over to the rock pile in a minute to kind of show you what we were working with originally. The rocks were way bigger originally. And then it was time to move them over and lower them down into the hole to stack them up, which is what you're going to watch next. So I'm just going to let you check that out. And there you have it. At this point, it's time to just take off the straps, level things up if they needed to, and they were really cautious to pay attention to the slope or the angle they're trying to make surrounding the doorway so that at the top portion, the angle would be correct as far as the rock wall. Just some simple leverage and prying here to get the rope off, and it'll be off in just a minute. Do you remember that big rock pile that I just mentioned? Well, this is it. I just wanted to show you what these rocks started out like, and they were split by drilling them in a line and looking at the structure of the rock, of course, first, and then some of them split really nicely, as you just saw with the rocks that were being stacked up over at the root cellar. We were pretty lucky to luck into these on the property because getting these rocks would have taken a really long time for us to go and get them out in the field somewhere, or purchasing them would have cost a lot of money. This rock stacking wall making process was one of the slower and more thought out processes of the whole root cellar build. It took a lot of time to sit and think and look and piece together the wall, which I am very fortunate and very lucky that my husband and my dad did. So I appreciate them, and here is them just tinkering and getting it done little by little, taking a little bit of time, and it's coming along. Here we go. Looking pretty good, and more planning and thinking and moving rocks one by one. At the top here you can see they are putting a lot more small rocks. That was kind of the plan, to have them kind of taper out and become a little bit smaller towards the top, and they are almost to the top of the building. If you watch them over on the side here, this is a little bit of the rock splitting that I was telling you about, and they are just making rocks to fit the wall and make it make sense. It is so close, almost there, and some more burying the root cellar. It was pretty awesome to see it finally get covered with dirt here. A little bit of shovel work on the top to smooth things around a little bit, and it is looking pretty good. Now to work on the slope around the front of the door. What we decided to do was, a few feet out from the doorway, dig a really deep hole where we actually ended up reaching the water table in order to backfill it with gravel. Now before that gravel got in there, the siding went up on the side, so he's working over a hole right here. And now it is time to throw a little bit of gravel in there. That went all the way down to the water table. It was about 6 to 7 more feet down, and now we have it packed with gravel, so hopefully if we do get a big rain, it will drain right there and it won't pull up around the doorway. That was our thought process with this part of the root cellar construction. And look at that. That is a beautiful sight in my opinion. This is our finished product and what we're going to end up leaving it looking like for the rest of the winter.
Well, that is it. That is the build of our root cellar. That's where we are today. And now we're going to take you inside of the root cellar to see what it ended up looking like. We're squeezing this in before it gets dark, so bear with us. I know the lighting isn't the best of quality, and we have some animals playing behind us, but we're going to take you inside. So come on, let's go in. All right, so this is what I call a little breezeway here. We did opt for lights that are on bulb batteries, so get them turned on. Come on in. 3 lights. That is it. This is the root cellar. We're really glad with the way it turned out. Oh, we got the cat. Follow this in here. We'll make sure to get that cat out of here. So it is currently December. We are almost to Christmas. We are a couple weeks away, and all of the stuff we got in here right out of the garden. So we have, well, I'm going to do a more extensive tour on what we have in here. And next year I'm hoping to have shelves with them completely stocked. This year it was kind of like, we just wanted to make sure we could at least have this space built, so we weren't really
banking on having a bunch of area to store various root crops. So next year it should be a little bit better. But if you are interested in a little bit more detailed root cellar tour, talking about some of the features and showing off what we have in here, I'm going to be making a video on that soon. So please stay tuned to our channel. And if you are curious about how much it cost us to build this root cellar, I'm also making a video on that, and that one should be coming out pretty soon. So make sure to like and subscribe so that you can see how much it cost us to do this venture. We really had no idea what to expect when we started it. And it would have been handy to have seen a video on a cost estimate. Check out that video when it comes out if you're interested. Anyways, that's this whole video. If you stuck around to this point, we really appreciate you watching all of this build, and we hope you catch us on the next one.